This time on Captain Cass's laboratory, we're going to be working on Department 56, the Christmas candy mill. That doesn't sound so good. And the belt looked horrible. So, the motor's going out, and the belt's bad. The belt just drives the peppermint stick. What's it says? Peppermint there. It's dry rotted, and it's been sitting in one position for so long it's cooked itself, which is why it lifts up right there into that position. But a motor is extremely loud, and if you move it in different positions, it gets quieter or louder. If I put, and then you see it slips. It's a synchronous motor. It shouldn't slip. It should either try and rip it out of my hand or stall. So the insides of the motor are gone, which is pretty common on synchronous motors over time. Plus, it's been leaking on the shaft. See that black ring right there? That's not normal. That's the grease inside the motor coming out and following the shaft down. The motors are sealed. If you don't know what synchronous motors is, and you first time on the channel, that's a synchronous motor. The motor is actually in the middle where this middle pin is, and it drives all these gears all the way around, which are planetary gears, and it drives this, which is the main drive gear. This is going to have a shaft on it, so it's going to look more like this. And the grease shouldn't come out there. There's a seal. It's not supposed to ooze out of the, and then get onto the back of that. So, we're going to tear it apart. I know it's not this motor. This is a 127 volt max motor. This is made for high powered stuff. And it's more of this motor, where it's 12 volts AC, but it's got the wrong end. So I'll see if I have a motor, but first thing we gotta do is take this thing apart. And that's where the fun comes in. This, just like a couple of the other pieces are similar, that like the one that has the peppermint wheel that spins, or like the Star Bright, you have to heat the dome or the top up to get the top off, and that takes a lot of time and patience. But I'll show you. I'm gonna unplug this so I don't have to listen to it scream, because it's getting really annoying. Hopefully you'll be able to see. There's a seam right here. This one's really tight. A lot of them aren't this tight. But right where the red and the white meet is where you can there you go. That's the seam that takes that off. And the motor is attached to that dome. From the bottom, get a flashlight in there. Maybe it'll help. So you all can see. See the screws? There's one there. There's one there. The screws go up because they're screwed into the dome. So the way to take the dome off is you got to get it really hot. And I say really hot, I mean really hot. It's been suggested to me to wear gloves. I'll probably try it this time. I might use an UV glove because it reduces this heat, but also still gives me dexterity. That's the problem with using gloves when you get these hot, is you lose your dexterity, and if this slips out of your hand, it's porcelain, ceramic, it shatters. So, in the interest of time, so this video is an hour and a half long, like a lot of them are, I'm going to heat this off camera. But you have to take the belt off, which is going to be really difficult because there's no way for it to come off on either end. So probably just jump the belt off, but just so you can see, if you can see all those cracks. I'm also going to see if I have a belt that may fit, and if not, try and find a replacement belt. So if you take the belt that way, you might be able to walk it over the blades. Might. Probably not. But this shaft probably is threaded on, which means you can see the seam. This will have to be heated up and popped off to get this big piece off, or the windmill blades. And then we can heat all the way around this, except for right here where the chimney is, and slowly work this cap up. So that's going to be the process I'm going to go for. The belt I might just have to put out of the way, just so I can heat this up, and then try and get the blades off. So I'm just going to loop it up here for now, just to hold it. And then if I don't have something, which means this will sit, I'll contact a couple of places that carry parts and see if I can find a replacement belt. So I'll be back in a moment, hopefully with the top being separated so we can see what kind of motor it is, see if I have a motor, and we'll go from there. Once we do that, we can replace it. Then I got to figure out how to replace this belt because, as you see, it's captive. There's no way for this side to come off. I'm assuming, because this pulley is free floating, that this pulley is pressed on and to maybe like a ball or a pin, and it might come off. Or we pull the pin on this peppermint stick and then we slide it off. So I'll figure that out when we get to it. First part is I'm going to get this heated up and start separating it. So I shall return when this is heated up and separated, and we'll go from there. Be back with you all in just a moment. Alright, we're back. I got it apart. I set my machine for 260 degrees Celsius to get it hot enough to break free. I did use an UV glove to help. It does help. It comes apart in multiple pieces. This does not come off. Don't try it. The shaft is pressed in. So the shaft has a spacer. You can see it right there. Then it's a metal shaft with a squared, more rectangular-ish piece on the end that slides through the hole and goes into the motor. The motor has it's got a dual ring. This ring goes here, and then that's what's glued down. Both were glued, but this was glued to this was glued to that. So I unscrewed the motor because these were covered in the same resin. So since I had the heat gun on, I took the resin and heated it up and peeled it off so I get the screws out. So here's the motor. It is a 12 volt. Let's see if we get a little focus. 2.5 watt clockwise or 5-6 RPM rotation. And this one's going to be fun because I'm going to have to find one with a shaft like that. You can see it's not quite square, it's more of a rectangle. And you can see it's just breaking down horribly. It is a 40 millimeter base. So this is a 40 millimeter motor. It's a synchronous, it's 12 volts AC, 5 RPM, but it's CW, CCW, right there. What that means, if you or again never watched any of the other videos with them, CW means clockwise, CCW means counterclockwise. So what this does is every time you turn it off and on, it changes direction. So one time's going right, one time's going left. This one is clockwise only, so that the blades would spin in the proper direction. Most of the problems are they don't make too many single direction motors anymore. Almost all of them that I've come across that say clockwise only or counterclockwise only, when I order it, the motor is not stamped that. The motor is stamped both directions and it spins in both directions. So there's a lot of misleading ads out there. He's like, oh, I Googled it or I looked it up on Amazon and I found it. Order one. I've had one or two come that are actually one direction, and usually they're the wrong size. So that's a big problem. But like this one here, this one is a lot larger. This is a 60 millimeter barrel. Again, outside dimension. This one was advertised as a counterclockwise only. What does it say right there on the sticker? CW, CW. So, yeah. It has the squared shaft at the top, but this is actually threaded, so you can put a screw in it. That is the problem. So I'm going to have to try and locate a motor that's going to work in here. Because most of my motors are either too large or they have a shaft like this. Which that shaft is like, what, 3 inches? Yeah, it's a 3-inch shaft. So, a little too long. Also, this shaft is threaded at the top and it's solid the rest of the way. So it's not going to do me any good. I would normally try and modify it and make it work, which is still a possibility, but if I can't find a motor, I might try and put this top plate on this motor. Because these are both 40 millimeter, and they're both, nope, this one's not made by TYC, I thought it was. The flange plate might swap. No. This is a 2-winged flange, and this is a 4-winged flange. Also, if you notice, this motor is smooth, and this motor has got attaching screws. If you can't find it, which I'm going to search before I just do a modification, you can, if it comes with that, you can just cut those off with a little grinder, Dremel tool with a cutting wheel, and then make it smooth around. So this is where the video is going to stop, so I can try and locate parts. And I'm going to try and locate one that has that end. So this black ring on the back is probably the grease they used to spin on this bushing. So it's not actually leaking out of the motor, except right there on the actual motor, so it's not following the shaft. So at the beginning of the video I was wrong when I said it's leaking and it's not supposed to. It's just the lubrication they used on the actual metal shaft through the plastic bushing, so it spins and probably doesn't squeak that way. I use a dry lubricant. I'll show you what I use, and that's what we'll reassemble it with. Dry film lubricant, non-stick. It's oil-free. It's dry, it's clean, it repels grit and grime. It does actually work, and because it works good for this, reduces sliding friction. And it's, I don't want to say it's Teflon, but it's like a Teflon. It says it's actually a ceramic technology. But it works really, really good on bushings and shafts that go through something, so it doesn't do that rubbing, vibration, squeak noise. So, and I'm going to look for a belt so we can get that replaced. As far as the belt goes, I'm thinking we'll just try and pull this pin out because there's not enough flex on the peppermint shaft to come out of the porcelain, and I don't want to break the shaft. And then we'll just pull the belt out. Looking at it, I can't really get it to pop off of the shaft, and I don't really want to break it unless this is a dab of glue that covers something like a screw or a nut. But I'm going to see if the pin comes out. The pin may just come out. I'm actually doing a closer look at it. It's a 2-piece pulley. I don't know if you can see the seam in the middle right there. So I bet you this is screwed on here, and then they just glued the face back on. That makes more sense, actually. But I'll deal with that once I locate a belt. I don't feel like tearing it apart and not finding a belt that's going to fit, because then you might break it. Now, the belt works, it just doesn't look as good as it should because it's not new. But that's where we're at. Bad motor. It's breaking down internally. I'm going to do some research and see what I can find. And just got to heat it up. I used 2 spudgers. I used this one because the seam was so small, because it's so narrow. To start it, once I got it lifted, I used a rigid spudger to hold it and then work my way around. The hard part was right here and right here where the chimney is. I'm going to clean all this off, and when it goes back together, I'm probably just going to do hot glue, so that way in the future when the motor fails again, because it always will, it's easier to take apart. You don't have to get it near as hot. So that's where we're at, and that's where we're going to stop. So as soon as the part or modification is located, we'll get this thing finished up. All right, well, on the windmill, unfortunately, you can hear it, when you tip it back, but it's quiet when you leave it forward. I have bought dozens, and it's not an exaggeration, dozens of motors. None of them work. None of them have that input shaft where it's built into the motor. All the motors have extended shafts, not necessarily this long, but this is an example of one. You can see I have taken apart dozens of them. Here, this is actually 3 different motors mixed together. The casing for the third one's behind me. I just threw all the gears in here because there's more gears than there is space for them. This is like 3 or 4 different motors. No matter what configuration I do, I cannot get them to fit because these are different manufacturers. This one is a TYC motor. I believe this one is also a TYC. This is an On-Yi, and On-Yi doesn't make the motor anymore. We contacted the company, actually. You can do it through their internet website. TYC makes tons of these motors in different configurations, but none with a slot recess shaft. So I went through, found some matching gears, replaced the gears inside the casing of the motor. I have previous videos where I show you how to open these, but brief overview is there are 4 tabs you have to bend back, and then you carefully pry the motor off with the case of the motor with a small screwdriver, because you'll break a spudger or the other ones are too thick. What I normally do is I pry 2, usually this side where the output shaft is, and then I guess you're going to talk now, huh? It's that. And then I usually just tip it and slide it out from under the back too. That way I have an alignment, so I know that I can get these 4 pins to line back up in their holes. So I replaced some of the gears. The actual windings, the commutator and stator and all that stuff, those are what's going bad. On a lot of these motors, what fails is the center, this piece, the armature, that big magnet. What happens is this gear that is actually pressed and glued in separates, and then the vibration is this thing skipping. This is not the problem with this one, or this one. This was a brand new motor. I can't pull the white plastic or nylon out because it's still attached. You can't pull the magnet out because it's got 2 ears that hold the magnet in, so the magnet cannot walk up. Let's see, how's this guy here? Let's pour out all the gears. This one's the same way with the ears. They're not all that way. So here's another one that's nasty looking that has the output shaft. This one has more than ears. It has a complete band around it. On the TYC 50s or the 50s, this is a 40. What they do is they measure the diameter of the barrel, the body. So these are 40s, and this is a 40. I'm trying to find a 50. Oh, here's something bigger. This one is a, yeah, this one's a 60. So this is a 60. You can see the diameter difference. So it's very important you match them up. 40 millimeter, there's a 50 millimeter, which is very common, and then there's a 60 millimeter, which is this guy here. Then they come in teardrops and so on and so forth. A lot of these little Department 56, because this is very small, use the 40s. And the 40s have tons of shaft varieties, but they're all long shafts with threads, or short shafts with threads, or D shafts with threads, or even pressed on gears. But the ones that Department 56 used when they built this as an example, because of its age, they no longer make. So you can only do so much. So at the moment, this one's going to go back to its owner for his display, because it does work with the new gears, and the new lubrication, which helps it stay a little smoother. But it does intermittently do the grinding sound when the magnetic coils fail, because that's what's going on with this one. The 12 volts is powering it, and then every once in a while it reads like 8. It's literally dying. The motor itself is dying. Usually on synchronous motors, when they fail, they don't burn up or cause the whole unit to shut off like they do in Limax with the standard motors, and that's just the way they're designed. but they do start to grind, they chatter, they vibrate, they don't turn. I've only seen one that got so hot that it burned, and there was some black around the ports in the back. Normally they just do what this one does, where it goes the grinding sound every once in a while. So we are probably going to revisit this in the future if I can find a motor. And we'll show you how to actually, if I can find a motor, I'll show you where it came from. Also, this belt I talked about with the belt needing to be replaced. Happy Holidays Parts does carry it. At the current price is about $14 for the belt. I have not figured out how to take the belt off though. Because that pin is assuming how I would take it out, but I cannot get that pin to budge, even with heat. The pin that holds the peppermint stick that's going up and down. So, like I said, we're probably going to revisit this one. But I wanted to give you an update because it's now almost Thanksgiving, and the person wants to set up their display, and they want to put this back in their display. And after having it for a couple of months of trying to find motors constantly, even the other guy looked motors. That's when we contacted the manufacturer, and they said they don't make it anymore. Your best bet, if you really like this piece, is I do know that some places still sell it. I have, up until this year, I've seen this at my local Hallmark store still on their display. So you might find one. You might find one on eBay. Just looking, I found a couple of these for about 50, 60 bucks. And they say they work fine. So I'm assuming they work. I could be wrong. I've seen people lie about what they're selling. But 50, 60 bucks probably isn't bad to replace something if you really like it. I hate to say that because the whole point of this part of the channel, the laboratory part, is to actually fix things. But when there's nothing left to use to fix them, it gets a little hard. But I'm not going to give up. I constantly, usually every other day, I search for motors, synchronous motors, as well as regular motors online on eBay, Amazon, just general internet searches with different search engines. And eventually, I might actually find something that I can replace this with. I might find a couple of Anyi motors sitting in a warehouse, or I might find a couple links where somebody has hundreds upon hundreds of old school Anyi motors. But so far, no luck. But at the moment, it's quiet. At the moment, it will intermittently do the grinding sound when the stop bar vibrates, and then it will continue back on its way. So maybe in a couple of months, we'll be back with this. I'm hoping by the time I get this back to me, which will be after the new year, I will have found a suitable replacement. So, not the greatest result, but it is a result in the fact that I was able to quiet it down a little bit and get it to continually spin versus vibrate just by changing the gears and changing out the stop bar, which I don't know if any of these have that stop bar on it. I'll show you what I'm talking about. Here's one. So this one's a 50. It's a 9 volt. It's the one that always fails in Leamax that you can't find. That's the stop bar. This right here. It's what stops it from reversing directions. So I replaced the stop bar in this one to a slightly longer one to help put a little pressure on the armature. That's all I could do. And how I got that longer one is you can't buy parts. I literally took it out on one of the other motors that I have in pieces. So these are brand new motors that are now pretty much garbage. It's because I've stripped them of their internals. I can try and rebuild them and put these shafts back in, but most likely they'll never work the same. So this is why I do this, to try and find a suitable repair so you don't have to. And then once I find it, I post it so that way you can fix your own if you have it. So as of now, this one is as done as it can be. So until the next repair, which hopefully will be fully repaired and not partial, we'll see you then.